all the stakeholders, both the people who make policy and the people who are affected, educators, the students, and the parents. Everybody needs to be on this together. Yeah. You can't just have one sector determining and dictating what's going to happen. The people who are affected, they need to have a say too.
Because in that report we just played, you did hear Mr. President say that what El Rufai is doing, the Kaduna State Governor, is what he told him about 10 years ago. So one would think that perhaps this is the right way to go. Or do you think perhaps if sacking 22,000 teachers will solve the problem, will that be the way to go? Or is sacking 22,000 teachers not the way to go?
I really do believe in excellent standards. Anyone who knows me knows that I constantly strive and talk about excellence a lot. However, if you're sacking 22 teachers, we should remember, where are you going to get the people who are going to replace them? Do you have structures in place to recruit staff that is highly qualified, really trained, ready to step in right now? If you don't have that, then you need to sit down and map out intervention. And there are a group of us that are working on this right now. We have to map out intervention that is going to be able to help us to raise standards so that we can get back to being excellent like we used to be back in the days.
Well, you're hands-on on some of these challenges out there. Could you tell us, what are some of the challenges you've experienced in education in this country?
First of all, I have to address the budget, because I just heard them talking about the budget in passing. We have 7% of our GDP allocated to education, and we're saying that we want to move forward as a nation. In my research, I found that at the UAE, Dubai, their allocation is 20%. That of South Korea is 15%. And you wonder why these nations are making such strides right now, why the rest of the world is looking up to them and seeing how they're doing excellent. South Korea, they are leaders in mathematics and science right now. Before we came on, I was talking to you about STEM education. The rest of the world knows that STEM education is the future. All the phones that we all use now are mostly manufactured and modeled in South Korea, and we all use them. That goes to tell you that they're doing something right. So if you want to see, for me, whenever you're working and you're trying to become like somebody, you ask yourself, what are the things that person is doing right? Of course, you're not going to copy everything the person is doing, but you see what the person is doing right, and then you try to model after some of it. Of course, you have to adapt for your own situation and your own environment.
Because it seems to suggest to a lot of people that this has to do with system change. And the curriculum that we have and the one that we run as a country, and perhaps looking at the best ways to see that we have things that are specifically modeled towards the needs of our people. How much have your organization, maybe sister organizations, since you're non-government based, how much of that have you been able to pass across, just so that we have an understanding that perhaps we need to change and get more results?
Curriculum. Just a month ago, I was with the president of the Science Teachers Association in Nigeria, and we were discussing our curriculum in Nigeria. We have our curriculum. Yes, there are areas in which we need to tweak it and work on it, but we have actually really, really good curriculum. Our issue and what we're trying to address in Nigeria is execution. We have a lot of fantastic plans on ground. We have a lot of things that we need to start deploying. Execution is what, for the most part, I see that we have issues with. And execution, part of our problem with execution is not giving the right resources to back up execution. We have this fantastic curriculum. Are we empowering our teachers to be able to deploy it? Are we empowering them to be able to use it with the students? I'm mentioning science. If I'm going to be teaching chemistry and physics, and I'm not able to have experiments with my students, I'm just teaching them theory, whereas the rest of the world is more talking about problem solving and creative thinking and critical thinking, there's a major disconnect right there. So, yes, you have a fantastic curriculum, you have the things, plans reading in place, but you don't have the resources and you're not empowering the people to be able to carry it out. There's a disconnect there.
That means we don't have the kinds of teachers that we need. For instance, what we're seeing playing out in Kaduna State. Do we have the kind of teachers we need? Do we have the quality of teachers we need to teach our children today?
Quality of teachers comes back again to execution. We have a plan in place, but have we really executed that plan to be able to train and equip our teachers properly? Have we been making sure that we follow up with continuous professional development for them? The nations that I just mentioned, that is something that is a hallmark for them. There's constant professional development for them. Do we do that? Do we push our teachers towards that?
What would you advise be done in the case of Kaduna State, for instance, these 22,000 teachers? What should we do with them?
Like I said, we need to have everybody on board. Don't just throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are some teachers, obviously, who really are not cut out to do the job. There's no two ways about it. But there are some who really, really, really want to give their best. They really work hard. They really want to work with their students. Weed through them. See which ones we can work with. Train them, empower them, build them. Like I said, there are a group of us that really do want to work with these teachers, want to empower them, want to deploy intervention strategies, and constantly create capacity building for them, transforming and reforming our system. We need to empower people who are ready to do that, like us.
How successful are some of those works of yours and your colleagues going?
When you are baking bread, it takes a little bit of yeast. That's your catalyst. I like to believe, and I hold on to the fact that there is hope, because like I said, when you're baking bread, you put a little bit of yeast, and gradually it works its way through the flour, the dough. We are working, we're pushing. We need more of us to support our parents. I mentioned their key stakeholders, our educators, because we're fighting for you. And of course, our policy holders to come and say, you know what, we see what you're doing. How do we all come together and sit down at this table and effect change?
Because, I mean, parents too, and then students, that's on the one hand, but sometimes when you get to see reports, or even JAM tell you that these days, you see parents who want to do certain things for their wards. We have to ask the question, are we, from what you've seen out there, are we really willing to go the whole hog and ensure that we take the pains to do what we have to do to move our education system forward?
We need a mindset reshift in this country. We really do. Unfortunately, our priorities are not where they should be. We need to understand that, like I mentioned earlier before, the rest of the world is moving at lightning pace right now towards everything being technologically based. There's a digital revolution, as we all know. We're all addicted to our phones now. We need to prepare ourselves for that. A lot of jobs are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. It's out there. We all know that. Cars, a lot of cars are going to be electric in the next 5, 10, 15 years. We need to start preparing our children for that. So there needs to be a shift. There needs to be preparation, building our students. There's a term I coined last year called future readiness. And future readiness to me is enabling our students to adopt and have innovative thinking, where they use tools to prepare themselves for college. That's if they decide they want to go to college. That's another topic. And career that they want in the future. In this rapidly changing economy, we need to start having that mindset of seeing the future as already being here. Sometimes I'm amazed at how things are moving by at lightning pace. I follow a lot of scientific and technological advancements on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm amazed at how things are just moving so fast. We should be preparing and building our students for that instead of leaving them stuck in the 20th century. The rest of the world is talking about 21st century skills. So there needs to be that shift for our parents, and we need to create that mental shift for our students and empower educators to deploy these skills.
Do you think that we're in a state of emergency in the education sector?
Beyond the state of emergency, it's a crisis.
So what must we do, I mean, in terms of, say, if we're looking at technology as the determinant of success for any nation, and hopefully education will take the lead. What must we begin to do now sectorally, or should I say give it some timelines? What must we do step by step to write and put our students or the children in the right path to meet up with these challenges?
Like whenever you're trying to do something, I know I sound like a resounding gong, but there's a reason why I'm reiterating. When you say something 3 times, it sticks in your mind. The example of South Korea. I just saw some slides a couple of, I think it was 2 weeks ago, showing where South Korea was in the 50s and the 60s. Do you know that I actually believe that the pictures I was looking at were here in Nigeria? It was to my ultimate amazement that they were actually pictures from South Korea. And then I saw the pictures of where they are now. What happened that made that shift between where they were and where they are now was education, and they had a plan. And the plan was, first of all, started with the young ones. And that's why I like to say catch them young. I believe that primary education should be free. But beyond being free, we should deploy teachers who are highly trained to really boost our students and make them have this love of learning, and also to boost and empower the skills. Then we get to our secondary school years and also have very highly trained, highly skilled teachers. And you see, for you to do that, you have to reward excellence for the teachers. You have to create incentives for the teachers. And that's what they've done in those countries. Singapore, Finland, they've done that. They've created incentives. They've created environments that make the teachers very proud of what they're doing and ready to give their best to the students. Plus, of course, they choose the best candidates from the universities to be teachers. You can only give what you have. If you have the best, you give the best.
You know, you alluded to us having 7%. Compared to some other countries that have got 20%, or perhaps more. I'm just wondering, if we were even to increase it to 15 or 20%, with the way our structure is currently constituted, can we make the desired impact?
Execution. I come back to execution again. You're right. Even dumping more money when you don't have a properly aligned structure does not help. So we need to have properly aligned structures. We need to have the right people. We can't just throw titled heads and say you are in charge of this sector, in charge of that sector. We have to have people who actually have experience and who have shown a track record for excellence. Because remember, what we're trying to model for our students is excellence. The rest of the world understands about this. We need to get to that place. And not that we are not excellent. Look at how wonderfully we do in other countries. You hear reports of people, some of our students in the US, being admitted to the 7 Ivy League colleges. You hear our students smashing records in Russia, medical student records in Russia, in the UK. So our students are hardworking. Our students are capable of the best. We just need to empower them here.
You know, I'm there to read the report, maybe from any of the ministers of education, saying this is why students are leaving. These are the specific things that they get there. These are things that we think we can do to ensure that we keep them here, given the amount of money we spend on education in Africa alone, let alone in Europe or the rest of the world. But I'm just wondering, would you recommend, because I mean, as the environment is different in different parts of the country, the housing needs are different in different parts of the country, should we have a national strategy for education, or do we let states come up with tailored strategy for education, but then we all say, well, these are some of the key things we want to achieve nationally, so let different states come up with a strategy, but you must feed into this. What should we do?
I think the second suggestion you have, recommendation, actually will work. Have a national strategy, then have the states have some autonomy where they rule and do what they're doing in there, but still keying to the national framework. It's worked in a lot of countries, and I know it will work here. Giving everybody different rules, it will have a lot of disjointed, and it won't be really good for our students. That national framework, that structure, that uniformity, we're one nation. No matter what, we should never lose sight of that. We're one nation. So we should have that uniformity, but still give an autonomy to each of the states, because like you correctly said, the terrain and what's going on in each of the states is different, but still have that